1, 2, 3. Good morning, everybody. It is great to be with you here in sunny Florida. I'm Reverend J. Wolin, the settled minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota and Lakewood Ranch, and welcome. We especially want to welcome visitors to both on campus as well as those online. We want to invite you to consider registering in our guest book, which you will find via a link on our homepage on our website, uucsarasota.com. And if you do, we will send you a weekly newsletter. I just want to let you know, and it'll tell you about all the events that are happening in our church. If you are here in person, we do have a sign outside, a table right outside there for visitors to sign up in person if you like. And we have coffee, and usually today we're going to have a potluck. So plenty of food. Even if you didn't bring something, I can guarantee you there will be plenty of food. So please join us. And as well, we have that big water slide. So have fun today. We look forward to getting to know each other. A couple of quick announcements. I was handed one. Of course, we all know there's a tropical storm or a hurricane now, I think, heading our way. We have no idea where it is going to end up, but if so, it does end up hitting here. We want to let you know that we're inviting people that if you have a safe place that someone can stay, to please, we have a sign-up sheet outside. I believe Dee will be at that table. And then as well, if you need a place, whether you're right on the coast or you are in housing that is not secure as well, and you need a place to stay, please as well sign up for that. You never really know until the day before the hurricane which way it's really going to hit, but this is a way we can take precaution and to help each other as a community. So please do not hesitate to do that if you are able. I have the announcement today is actually our Share the Plate. This is the last Sunday of the month, the Share the Plate Sunday, where we give 100% of our offering to our Share the Plate recipient, which will be this month, Streets of Paradise, a 501c3 nonprofit serving the homeless in Sarasota. Their mission is fighting homelessness with dignity and grace. We oppose poverty and racism. We advocate for those who suffer from discrimination by empowering them to obtain a better quality of life. And here today to just give us a very brief overview is their president, Clara Barton. Please give her a round of applause.
Good morning, and thank you so much. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and I'm super grateful and honored to be here with you all this morning. And you can't hear me, can you? Sorry. I want to thank Nina for inviting me here, and I will look forward to meeting each and every one of you at the social justice table afterwards. Streets of Paradise, our goal is to build purposeful relationships within the community, and since 2019 to date, we've furnished a little over 1,700 homes of people coming off of the streets, out of foster care or other programs. And it's mostly because of you guys and people like you who make it possible. So I look forward to answering any questions and talking to all of you afterwards, and thank you again.
Thank you. Making real change for people in their lives, in our community. I thought that was a very good tie-in with my service today. Our opening reading is from Illuminata by Marianne Williamson, just slightly adapted. And I quote, "We are on the brink of an important breakthrough in human consciousness, the torch that is borne by the human heart, by everyone who loves or who even believes that there is such a thing as love, casts a light in whose presence the injustice of the world cannot continue to exist. We must believe, we must hold on to this. We must do our part to let those rays of light shine through us, and our lack of conviction holds the world back. Our willingness to serve it opens up the windows and lets justice stream in and stream out. As we light our chalice today, let its light symbolize the passion in our hearts for justice, and we invite Rowan, who will be lighting our chalice. And please join me now in saying the words of affirmation that are on the screen behind me. As we light this chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, we affirm our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And now I invite you to rise in body and or spirit for our opening hymn, number 1018, Come and Go With Me.
Now that we got your blood broiling, I'm going to bring it down a notch. Today's story, Good Night Racism, by Ibram X. Kendi, and illustrated by Kababi Bayok. Outside the window, peeking down from the night sky, the moon watches over us. She sees kids smiling at dinner tables and yawning in their beds. But some kids do not have food, do not have beds, because of unfair rules and unjust treatment. The moon sees all kids, whoever they are, wherever they are, and her light shines on them. The moon wants her light to kiss every child goodnight. The moon delights when every child falls asleep, just as their parents do. Because the moon knows when we sleep, we dream. And when we dream, we imagine what is possible, what the world can be, and the moon glows a little brighter, whispering, "Dream, my child. Imagine, my child. A new world, a new future awaits. A world where all people are safe, no matter how they look or how they worship or how they love. A world where all kids have the same chance to have peace, to have joy, to have a childhood. A world where all people breathe fresh air and what they need to feed their minds and their bodies. A world where our rules open doors, open minds, and create equity and justice for all. Dream, my child. Create, my child. A new world, a new future awaits. Good night, unfair rules. Good night, cruelty. Good night, injustice. Good night, inequality. Good night, hate. And good night, hurt. Good night, racism. Good night. So, as we contemplate these words of hope and breaking down barriers between us all, I have found one of the best ways to get to know people is over a meal. And so, I am looking forward to having great conversation and breaking a meal with you outside in the east parking lot, next to the water slide, under the tent, where we will have our potluck today. If you brought food, it is your job to bring your food to the table outside. We don't have any volunteers to do that for us today. Thank you.
Our centering words I've entitled A Passion for Justice, which I've adapted from multiple sources. O Spirit of life and love, where there is ignorance and superstition, let there be enlightenment and knowledge. Where there is prejudice and hatred, let there be acceptance and love. Where there are fear and suspicion, let there be confidence and trust. Where there are tyranny and oppression, let there be freedom and justice. Where there are poverty and disease, let there be prosperity and health. And where there are strife and discord, let there be harmony and peace. Kindle in us a passion for righteousness. Grant us the vision to see that only justice can endure, and only in being just to one another can we make our lives acceptable. May we, by our thoughts and by our deeds, hasten the time when wrong and violence will cease, and justice be established in all of the earth. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. And as we imagine a stream of water, we will be entering into a time of silence. And I invite you, if you're comfortable, maybe close your eyes, breathe slowly in and out of your nose, and center yourself. And just imagine, and sort of like the book said, dream what a world with justice would be and how it would be experienced. Our next reading today comes from the book Strength to Love by Martin Luther King, Jr. We do not finish breakfast without being dependent on more than half the world. When we arise in the morning, we go into the bathroom where we reach for a sponge which is provided for us by a Pacific Islander. We reach for soap that is created for us by a French person. The towel is provided by a Turk. And then at the table we drink coffee, which is provided for us by a South American, or tea by a Chinese, or cocoa by a West African. Before we leave for our jobs, we are beholden to more than half the world. In a real sense, all of life is interrelated. All men and women are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality, end quote. Another interrelated structure of reality is how we support the larger community and our weekly offering. And so, again, a reminder, 100% of today's offering will go to our Share the Plate recipient, Streets of Paradise. We invite you to please be as generous as you can. For those online or those here on your cell phone, there's a link to donate in the description of the YouTube video, or on our website right under the description of today's service. Or there will be baskets coming around, and feel free to write checks, bags of money, whatever you would like. Let this sacred time begin. Our next reading is from a lecture, Taking Time Seriously, by the Reverend James Luther Adams, a Unitarian theologian, probably written sometime in the 1960s. The meaning of life is found in the processes and responsibilities of groups and institutions. The entire responsibility of groups and institutions in this covenant view is responsible for the character of society. This is one of the great insights in history, namely, that one is related to the collective in such a way as to be responsible for the consequences of one's actions and for the consequences of collective action. Institutional and not merely individual behavior, is an indispensable aspect of human existence. Still my favorite musical of all time. So the phrase social justice is bandied about quite often, and it means different things to different people. Now, when I was a young adult, before I found Unitarian Universalism, I had attended the Ethical Culture Society in New York City, and similar to our Discover UU class, they had an introduction to ethical culture. And I heard a story about social justice in that class that has stuck with me all these years. And it went something like this. One day, a villager took a break from harvesting food and noticed a baby floating down the river towards the village. And the villager jumped in the river and pulled the baby out from the river. The next day, the same villager started paying closer attention to the river, wondering if babies had been floating down the river all the time, and he had never noticed it. And certainly that day, there were 2 babies then floating down the river, and he jumped in and he saved those 2 babies. And then the next day, there were 4 babies floating down the river. And the villager realized that, well, they could not save all those 4 babies themselves. So they called over to a friend, and both of them saved those 4 babies. And each day, the number of babies floating down the river increased and increased. So with so many babies, the village had to organize themselves. Watchtowers were built on both sides of the shore. Swimmers were coordinated to maintain shifts of rescue teams 24 hours a day. There was surveillance on that river. They had one group of people for medical care, others to provide housing, others to provide clothing. They grew more food to feed all those babies. And then one day, another villager asked, "Where are all these babies coming from?" "No one knows," responded another villager. So the person said, "Well, let's organize a team and go upstream and find out who's throwing these babies in the river." But not everybody was in agreement. If we send someone upstream, we may not be able to catch all the babies that are coming down the river or have people to cook or care for them. If we spend our time going upstream, some babies may die. And we don't even know if we can change the situation upriver. We should just worry about what we know. And so the ethical question that was posed at the end of that story to me and the rest of the class was, would we sacrifice the lives of some babies in order to search for the unknown cause of the problem? Should we go upstream? So staying downstream is what I would call social service, a direct rendering of service to those in need. Going upstream is what I would call social action, working for systemic change to the causes of injustice, rather than just dealing with the symptoms. Now, social action would and could and should involve education, right? Often people are not even aware of the causes of injustice or recognize that injustice even exists, like the villager who wondered whether there had been babies floating down the river all the time. So we must educate and persuade people. Often, so social action will also include public witness, which is one way to draw attention to the larger public to recognize that an injustice exists and there are people who envision a different way. In the past decades, groups such as Occupy Wall Street, the Women's March, Black Lives Matter, all movements have brought awareness to their causes successfully in this way. And social action would also include community organizing, with interfaith groups working towards changing the policies and systems that lead to injustice in the first place. By working together with community partners, we will be more effective and we will build relationships with others. I think that is as important as increasing our effectiveness for change. All of these actions, social service, education, public witness, and organizing, fall under the larger term social justice in my understanding. And not everybody in the ethical culture class agreed to go upstream and thereby sacrifice some babies' lives. And I ask all of you who are here today and online watching this to ponder that question as well. But I would also like you to consider that this duality of either or thinking is a false limitation on the possibilities that we often impose upon ourselves, right? It doesn't have to be either some babies die or we find the cause of the problem, right? And this is a very theological question. Are there only so many resources in the world to go around, or are there enough resources for all, right? And so I think about even what I learned in physics, right? Our physical universe is still expanding even now, which leads one to believe as well that our resources are expansive to meet the needs for all. Just like here in our pluralistic religion, right, we allow multiple theologies to flourish to meet the need of all who come here in this pluralistic environment. And if we believe there are enough resources for all, then we should act as a society in that manner. And no one in that class, I do want to point out, no one said to just let the babies float down the river, right? Like, you have to do something. And I think the question we need to ask is, are we truly guided by our Unitarian Universalist principles? If we are guided by the understanding of our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, then we cannot just turn away when we see suffering, right? Whether it is children going hungry, or people without homes, or the lack of health care, or our underfunded educational system. In this community, in this country especially, of enormous wealth, there is enough for all. And there should be enough for all if we believe, as our principles say, all are worthy. If we are guided by the concept of our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, we should not allow unequal treatment in our legal system, as we have seen with mass incarceration and racial bias, or new laws that attack women's reproductive health rights, LGBTQIA plus individual rights, or the prevention of teaching in our schools the history of racism and oppression in this country. If we are guided by our sixth principle, a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, then we should welcome into our countries those fleeing other countries due to violence, due to poverty, and the effects of climate change. If we are guided by the understanding of our seventh principle, that we respect the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part, then we need to address the existential crisis that is climate change and how it impacts and threatens our very species' existence. We must address how our actions, human beings' actions, affect the earth, and learn to live in harmony with the earth and not just see it as a resource. Our principles are the theological foundation of why social justice is an important part of our religion. Our principles should be something we internalize in the core of our very being and externalize in our actions in the world. And by becoming engaged, by doing the work to alleviate and to change injustice, we are changed ourselves. As Brian Stevenson, author of the book Just Mercy, spoke of at our General Assembly gathering, and I quote, "We need to get proximate to those communities at risk," end quote. Yeah, we may express things culturally in different ways. We may act in different ways due to the different circumstances of our upbringing. But even so, we need to be able to be open to understanding others, to experience the sacredness and the oneness of all things. Justice seeking has been a part of our religion since its founding. Some examples in our history are Benjamin Rush, a Universalist, who is a signer of the Declaration of Independence, by the way, was the founder of the first hospital for the mentally ill in this country. Horace Mann, along with the Peabody family, developed the public school systems in this country. You know what I found when I was in Boston, and I once said Peabody, and like I got everybody like No, it's Peabody. So I learned that. Not something I would have known just phonetically. Reverend Theodore Parker and many Unitarian transcendentalist ministers were leaders in the abolitionist movement to end slavery in the 19th century. It is said that Parker kept a gun in his pulpit just in case Southern slave catchers tried to arrest runaway slaves who were members of his congregation. And we know it was Unitarians, including Parker, who funded John Brown's violence to keep slavery out of Kansas and Brown's raid on Harper Ferry to free slaves. Universalist Clara Barton was the founder of the American Red Cross. One of the founders of the NAACP was Unitarian Mary Overton. Susan B. Anthony, a Unitarian suffragist, is known for saying, "I pray every day, not on my knees, but with my work." And the Unitarian Service Committee was founded in response to fascism in World War II and helped countless Jewish people, including many children, escape Europe during World War II. And during the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, many Unitarian Universalist ministers joined the March on Selma to help secure voting rights, and two Unitarian Universalists, Reverend James Reeb and Viola Liuzza, were killed in Selma during that time for their work for voting rights. And we as an association printed the Pentagon Papers, which exposed the lies told by the government about the Vietnam War. And we were the first religion that ordained and placed women in the pulpit, actually, in the 19th century. And now over 60% of our ministers are women. We were the early leaders in ordaining ministers who identify as BGLQT+, and we were at the forefront in the battle for marriage equality. And now we are again partnering with others to work against all forms of oppression in our society, including racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and transphobia. These acts demonstrate that social justice is in our DNA as a religion. This is not some new idea. It is the core of who we are as a religion. And I just say these examples include just a small list of some famous people and famous events that have been working for justice. But in every day, in every community, Unitarian Universalists have been tirelessly working for justice. And I don't have time today to point out the flaws of some of these people that I mentioned, and there were many, and there will be time for that, for those stories over the years. And there were also many missteps along the way, many. I have no doubt as we move forward, there will continue to be missteps. And hopefully we will learn from those missteps and progress. Nothing is certain except that if we do nothing, nothing will change. And so it is my hope that the congregation engages in a whole spectrum of social justice work. Because my response to that question was to go upstream. And that has always guided my religious and spiritual life. We don't always know what we're going to find upstream, but only by going upstream will we find a long-term solution so that one day no babies will ever have to be floating down the river, metaphorically. That one day there will be justice in this world for everyone, and that one day we will have peace. But often, achievement requires sacrifice. Sacrifice of time, sacrifice of other things we might do with our time, sacrifice of money, sacrifice of career, sacrifice of long-held ideas. And so the path being taken, we have to always ask ourselves, is it for the long-term good? Or is it just to make us feel good? How would we want to be treated if we were in somebody else's shoes? And the way you find that out is by asking others what they need from us, those directly affected by oppression, what they need from us, what they want us to do for them. Out of our common humanity, right, we cannot ignore the downstream. We cannot ignore current suffering. But I challenge you to constantly go upstream, to challenge yourself and others. For if we do not go upstream, the amount of suffering will one day become unsustainable and implode. And then many, many more will suffer. And if we do not go upstream, how can we hope to change the people who are causing this suffering? This process involves hope. Do we really believe that we can make a difference? Do we really believe that we can transform the way that people think and live and act? Do we really believe that we can transform the world? And if we, as a religious community, do not provide hope, who will? Unitarian Universalism does not promise hope for a better life in some other plane of existence after we die, although some of you may believe that, and that is okay. But we provide hope for this world, and we live eternally through the results of the actions that we take to make this world better for our children, our grandchildren, and others' children and grandchildren, going forward generation after generation. And if we believe we can impact the world, then we must act. And that is why for 4 Wednesdays, starting October 12th from 6 to 7:30 p.m., I will be leading social justice trainings to teach about social change. We currently have projects now in the congregation relating to racial justice, LGBTQIA plus advocacy. We're starting a new environmental justice project. This coming week, we're having our first meeting, at least since I've been here. There's a general advocacy group, and we have many, many service projects to work on. It is my vision that every issue or project that we work on as a congregation should include some aspect of service, education, public witness, and systemic change while working with partners in the larger community. I see my role as a resource to all of these groups, as well as a community voice for the projects that the church is working on. It is my vision that our church will continue to develop our reputation as a justice-seeking religion. For our religion is a shared ministry, so it is up to everyone here to participate in the ways that you can to make change. Everybody has different abilities and passions and skills, and so as you can. Social change work is not easy, and it is not quick. It takes courage, a constant need to learn, a willingness to be humbled, and a need to find the resources to sustain us when it seems too challenging, and it will at times seem challenging. Throughout human history, people have been driven to explore ways to improve themselves and their societies. And I believe that is part of our evolutionary makeup. There is something deep in the well of our being that makes us want to improve, to explore what is just, and to fight injustice wherever it is found, both within and without. And it starts when we make that connection with that burning flame within, that motivation that gives meaning to our life. And even though I wasn't a Boy Scout, either literally or figuratively in my life growing up, Even I know when you have to have a regular campfire. I know this because my wife was a camper, and whenever we went camping, she taught me this. The fire needs to be tended, or it will go out. It needs to be constantly tended to. So we keep working here on this meaning making. The meaning making we find in this building, in this community, is a way to keep that fire burning long and burning strong. And I encourage you then to share that light, to not just let the flame burn on the inside, but to let it out and to share that with others, and also as well to see the light within others as well. And then to combine our passion for justice with the passion of others as we work together to build a just and compassionate life and world. Come join us at the river, in the river, downstream, upstream. Help us transform the world, and in doing so, transform your world. It is through this work that we remember that we are interdependent to all that is, and that creates a wholeness within us. And this creating a wholeness within us is what the religious life should lead to. A wholeness or oneness, not only for ourselves, with ourselves, but a wholeness and oneness with each other, a wholeness and a oneness with others, a wholeness and a oneness with the environment, a wholeness and a oneness with the entire universe. May it be so. I now invite you to rise in body and or spirit for our closing hymn, number 1017, Building a New Way. Our closing words are from the Reverend Theodore Parker from his sermon, Justice and Conscience, in 1857. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is long one, my eyes reach but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight, but I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure that it bends towards justice. Please join me now in extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for your presence here today. Thank you. And eat and be merry.